Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Awaken to Your Soul Path. I am your host, Barbara, and today I am joined by James Kawainui, and we are going to talk about the truth about Ho'oponopono. And for those of you who do not know what Ho'oponopono is, stay tuned. We will tell you. And for those who think they know what Ho'opono is, also stay tuned because you're probably wrong. I've been looking forward to this talk for a long time, James, and I'm very, very grateful that you are here to talk about this topic today.
I'm grateful to be here and grateful for the opportunity. And I've been kind of excited about this as well because it's a conversation that I've recently in the last year or so have become more, I guess you could say, more convinced that this conversation needs to happen. And so having the opportunity to share, especially today, is perfect for me. So thank you.
You're most welcome. And yes, we've been pre-talking a little bit and about Ho'oponopono, and most people know it as Hawaiian forgiveness ritual. That's how most people talk about it. So for those who do not know what Ho'opono is, but also for those who think they know what Ho'oponopono is, what is Ho'oponopono?
The easiest way for me to explain Ho'oponopono would be to kind of give everybody a quick lesson in Hawaiian. And so if we take Ho'oponopono and we break it down so that we understand what it actually means, Ho'o is in some ways a prefix. And this in this regard, Ho'o is a prefix to emphasize something. And what it's supposed to emphasize is the word pono. And the word pono is very interesting. And just like all words in the Hawaiian language, there's so many different meanings to one word. And so the word pono, I'll explain a little bit more, but for me, the word pono means living in right action. And so when I talk about that, Ho'oponopono is right action. Ho'oponopono is righteous. Ho'oponopono is the correct thing to do. So when we talk about pono, it's in Hawaiian culture, the understanding of pono is looking at yourself the way you live your life. And it's another way of talking about it is as far as being in integrity. Pono and living in right action is being in integrity. Go ahead.
Is it then something like living true to yourself, treat other people like you want to be treated?
Those are all concepts that sit inside of that. But if we go back to the definition of Ho'oponopono in the Hawaiian dictionary, some people might be really surprised to understand this. In the Hawaiian dictionary, Ho'oponopono means to correct. That's it. There's nothing in there about forgiveness. It doesn't talk about forgiveness at all. Now, what most people understand Ho'oponopono is what they've been taught for the last 30 or so years. And that's come out of one school of thinking that has gained momentum over the years. And so it's, they say if you speak something enough, everybody will believe it. And in this case, that's what I think that Ho'oponopono has become. And so when people hear Ho'oponopono, they automatically think that it is the forgiveness ritual or the forgiveness ceremony. And it actually isn't that at all. It means to correct. And then we go into the depth of that. Because when we start talking about Ho'oponopono, we start talking about it in terms of Hawaiian culture. The practice of Ho'oponopono in ancient Hawaii was about conflict resolution. It was about resolving conflict between people. It was about resolving conflict between families or groups of people. And so we're talking about how to come back into living in right action with each other.
Mhm. But also with ourselves, I think, right?
Well, exactly. And I'm grateful that you pointed that out, because in order for me to live in right action outside of me, I actually have to be able to see and understand what that means inside of me.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
So when there was disagreement in old Hawaii between a group of people or between two different people, and they were not able to resolve it, especially if it had gone on for a really long time,
Mhm.
they would agree to go through the whole oponopono process.
Mhm.
And so inside of that process, there's a couple things that happen that were already in place. One is, ever try to resolve something with someone and all you do is end up arguing more?
I think everybody can
Everybody can.
point to examples of that in their life.
Exactly. So one of the first things that happened in the process of Ho'oponopono is that a mediator was chosen to bring those people and help them move through the process. So there's a third party that's involved inside of this, who was neutral, who wasn't for one side or the other. And their purpose and their responsibility was to allow both sides to come together to be able to say the things that they needed.
Mhm.
Now, before Ho'oponopono even began, the process even began, there was a cleansing, there was deep prayer work and meditation that was involved inside of that. So that I mean, and when I'm talking about deep cleansing, the Hawaiians would go through a process of actual physical cleansing. So they would, if it was fasting or clearing their bodies and coming into this place of having as much clarity as they could as they went into the process. So it may be a week or days of prayer, days of sitting in solitude with oneself, with coming into the understanding of what the true conflict is.
That's definitely not happening nowadays.
No, it's not. And you're right. And so as I talk about Ho'oponopono, and I'm actually writing a book about all of this right now, as I'm talking about that, I bring that back into a modern context, because one of the things that's happening, especially in the United States where I live, right, is we've stopped listening to each other.
Mhm. I think that's a common problem in first world countries, mostly.
Exactly, in most countries, we've stopped listening to each other, because what's happening is that we have a certain idea of the way that we see the world and the way that everybody in our world should be.
Yes.
And if anybody attacks that or has a different idea or perspective on top of that, then they're automatically wrong.
Mm.
There are, because that's that whole understanding of us against them.
Yes.
Right. And so inside the process of Ho'oponopono, having a mediator, having some neutral party, third party that's sitting in between, helps the process. And
Yeah.
so when they came together, what happened was each side was given the opportunity to fully state and say everything that they needed to say. And the mediator's job was to not let the other person say anything, because the reality is that you're going to get your turn. Your job or your opportunity is to sit and listen.
And that's, I think, what goes wrong in a lot of communication nowadays, that people, they don't listen, or they don't listen well enough, or they don't listen long enough. They hear something and immediately they want to defend themselves against that, instead of actually hearing what someone is trying to say. They immediately color it in with experiences or thoughts or assumptions that make them feel that they need to defend themselves or attack back or immediately get hurt, instead of trying to really take space for the other person's feelings and have them be able to express how things might have hurt them without it in turn hurting you, but just letting the other person vent what they need to, so that you can also do the same towards that person and then come to constructive conversation.
Exactly. And that's the piece inside of Ho'oponopono. That's, I think, one of the most important aspects, is that place of being able to say the things I need to say, because these are the way, this is how I feel.
Yes.
Without somebody stopping me so that they can defend themselves. And I think when we get into that place of defending ourselves, we stop listening completely, because we're already thinking of our rebuttal. We're already thinking about what we're going to say and how we're going to counter that and how we're going to prove to them that they're wrong.
Yes. Exactly.
And so in the process, both sides come together and have the opportunity to actually hear each other. And then they walk away and they take in what they heard, so that they can start to look at that. Because this is one of the pieces, as we start looking at ourselves, that I really see inside of this, right? It's this place of, how can I understand the effect that what I've said or what I've done has had on someone else, until I can actually hear what they're telling me. And then there's another place that most people don't go to, because we're so busy blaming other people that we're not looking at what I might have done.
No, because most people cannot handle that, I think, looking at themselves. It's far easier putting the blame on somebody else and thinking that the other person is the problem, because then I don't have to look at myself. And most people don't want to look at themselves.
Exactly. And that's the place. And this is in some ways a side conversation, but that's the place that we're all still being a victim, because we think that things are happening to us.
Yes.
Right. And as long as I think that the world is happening to me, and all these things are happening, and everything is against me, everyone is against me, then I will always stay the victim inside of that.
Yes.
Our world changes when I realize that all the choices and all the decisions and all the things that I'm doing has an effect on everything that's happening around me.
Mm-hmm.
And inside of the, I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, inside the process of Ho'oponopono, that's, I think, a critical piece inside of that, is looking at that and going, okay, how did I affect what happened? Because of my actions or my feelings, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, because what usually happens is we all have a history, we all have a past, we've maybe had traumas or experiences or whatever, and they influence how things come across or how we hear things. I had it happen with a friend of mine who told me, well, I have the feeling that you don't want to do this, this, and this, and that you're thinking this, this, and this makes me feel like that, that, and that. And when someone says things like that, you have, well, multiple choices, but one choice could be to be really hurt and thinking, I never said that, I never meant that, I never did that, and go into, resistance and thinking, no, and that's not true, and then go blame back, for instance. That is what a lot of people do. Yeah. But I told her, I'm very happy that you're telling me this, because and after your explanation, I can fully understand how it might come across that way for you, but this is how I intended it. And I also didn't feel hurt, because I understood that it was something that was at her side based on experiences she had, and she was not blaming me or accusing me. She was just sharing how things had come across. And when you can leave someone in their personal value and just hear what they are saying without it having to mean something about you or your behavior or your actions, then you can come from a place of love when you say, I'm really happy that you're sharing this with me. And this was my intention. And she was like, oh, I'm very happy that you're sharing this because now I understand. And then everything was okay. And we were both very happy instead of ending up in maybe an end of friendship argument, which is a very real possibility, right?
It is. And you said something that was very beautiful inside of that. It says, it helps me understand where you are.
Yeah.
Right. And that's when we get to that place, that's when true healing starts. Right.
I think so too.
That's when true healing starts. Because most of the decisions that we make are emotional ones.
Oh,
And all of our decisions are emotional. And so when we're in our emotion, then we're not actually listening to what's really going on. And that's where we come into judgment.
Mhm.
And it's not just judging you, but I'm judging myself too, because when this is part of the other thing that happens, I hear and I realize what I said and the reaction that had, and then I automatically feel guilt because I made them feel bad. I mean, not that doesn't always happen, but that's another piece inside of that, right? And so now back to the process of Ho'oponopono. Once people understand what the other side, how the other side feels, then the parties would go away and they would sit with the information. They would sit with what they heard. It would help them be more introspective about where they were. Maybe, sometimes we talk to people and we get really excited. And so, like I also say the example, when I speak with my wife, sometimes she gets really excited.
Mhm.
And when we first got together, I took her excited as her being angry at me.
Mhm.
And so I would immediately react and I would shut down and I would close her off and I wouldn't listen to anything else because I thought she was yelling at me.
Mhm.
And it took a long time for me to realize, no, what she was doing is she was being very passionate about what she was talking about. And so when I let go of my emotion and I could hear where she was at, it changed how I was listening and how I was hearing where she is.
Exactly, because instead of closing, you were probably able to be open and to truly hear what she was trying to communicate.
And this is another example of, can I stay in my heart?
Yes. And
Right?
that's a difficult thing for a lot of people because a lot of people, I think, are scared.
Yeah. To be that vulnerable.
Yes.
So we're looking at Ho'oponopono, but we're talking about human nature and we're talking about it in lots of different ways, right? So I that's why I think that the conversation and understanding Ho'oponopono from this point of view changes everything, because it gives everybody this idea and this understanding of what we can actually do with it.
Because
right?
I've been taught, and I think most people know Ho'oponopono as a ritual where you say, I'm sorry, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you.
Thank you.
And then you repeat that. Is that actually part of what Ho'oponopono is supposed to be?
No, that's what came through as a result of that perspective. Let's just put it that way. Because I don't want to make that wrong, because it's not wrong. It was a perspective that they gained based on their information.
It's
right?
a part of what Ho'opono can be.
It's a part of what Ho'oponopono can be, right? So the parties go back inside themselves. They look, they come back, and then they, because we're looking for solution. How do we resolve this? Is it all your fault? Is it all my fault? Is it a place where I go, I understand where you are now, and this is where I am, and I think we can do this, right? Yeah. And so it's this piece of coming back together and say, where do we meet that feels good for both parties, for both of us? Where can we agree and we can say, this feels good to me? Does this feel good to you? Are we in a good place? And sometimes the process of Ho'opono may take weeks or months. It wasn't a quick fix. It was this piece of coming back together, because when we get to that place where we are on the same page and we could hear each other, and it may be about compromise. It may be about asking for what we want. It may be about looking at this, not from win or lose, but win-win. Where do we feel? Because in that way, then what we come to is this place of mutual respect.
Yes, because in the end, you want to have it resolved, but you both want to have a good feeling after it's resolved. And usually when one blames the other and the other then needs to take it
Defend it,
or defend it, then that's not happening. And so I love that you are finding common ground, and I can understand that it might take a couple of weeks or however long it needs.
However long it takes.
It has to do with limiting beliefs, and it has to do with how well you are able to let go, or how well you can look at yourself from this bird's eye perspective and be objective about your own behavior and your own aspect in it. And I think that that's what a lot of struggle with, owning their part in things.
It's a huge piece inside of all of this. Because, and you're right, because it's way easier to blame other people. Right?
Yes.
So we look at everything that's happening, and the beauty of the mediator, the beauty of that third party is they hold space as well. So there's this other aspect of this that's holding space for both people or both groups, right? Yes. And inside of that is also prayer, because they're holding space. There's a prayer, because the prayer is they're going to find that place, that mutual ground, that common ground that they're going to come to, right? And as a mediator, and I've done mediating in business a long time ago, right? It's being able to hold that space and be neutral at the same time, hear both parties, but help each party hear each other. And then look at that and go, okay, where do we come together? Where is that place where we come together and we decide that this feels good for both of us, right? Exactly. And the process of Ho'oponopono is not complete until we come to that point.
No, I love that, because I discovered there is not one truth. We are always talking about the truth, or you're not telling the truth, or you're lying, but there is not such a thing as truth. I think everybody has their own version of the truth. What is true for you, but what is true for me might not be true for you, and what is true for you might not be true for me. And you need to find the common ground in both of our truths, because our truths are being colored by our emotions and by our experiences. And that's what makes us believe that you are not telling the truth, but you can both be right, which is something different from truth. You can both be right. This hurts me because this is, you're right in that it hurts you. But I am also right in how I expressed what it did to me and the way that I want to express what happened or what I was thinking. And it's not a matter of blaming each other. It's how things come across to you and how you then internalize them, and what then happens with your feelings and your thoughts, and that you then want to express back.
Truth is about perception, and yes. we all perceive the world in a different way, because we have different filters, right? We have cultural filters, we have societal filters, we have emotional filters, right? We also have filters that are based on our trauma and our past, right? And so when we start looking at all those pieces, it's no wonder that we've ended up where we have in the world in this moment.
No. Okay, we had a minor technical difficulty where James was frozen, but we are back.
We are back.
We are back. So we've been talking, and this is a really, really interesting topic. So we've talked about how it's what it's supposed to be, and that it's about looking at yourself and really holding space for the other, and really hearing what they are saying without feeling that you need to defend yourself or that you're being judged or attacked, but really taking their words and analyzing them and thinking, can I understand where they are coming from? Is there any truth to their words? And then trying to come to a peaceful resolve, I think, right? Together.
Together. And that's one of the major concepts also of Ho'oponopono, because when whatever it is that we came together for is completely resolved, the agreement is that we never talk about it again because it's completely resolved, right?
Yeah.
And so think about in your life how many things that you keep dragging from your past that are unresolved, that continue to be a filter or some kind of obstacle to us moving forward. When we're looking at relationship and we're looking at relationship with people, we have this tendency to keep bringing what's happened to us into present context or into present day or into present moment.
Yes.
So when we start talking about being present in our lives, we're really not present at all because we are being filtered through all these past experiences. So in the process of Ho'oponopono, when it's done, it is done. Done.
I love that. I think we should
And
do that more often.
we do. And now, when that shows up, now we can talk about forgiveness because that's really what's happened. We've gotten to the place in our lives in that process or with that person where forgiveness is actually possible.
Yes.
Right?
So that's the final step in letting it go.
The final step in letting it go, right? So the beginning process is realizing that there's a conflict and then being able to acknowledge that the conflict even exists. In other words, we both have to agree something's wrong, right? And then as we come into that acknowledgement, then we slowly come into acceptance. And acceptance is saying, I get it now. This is where you are. I get it now. This is where I am. Let's find a place where we can meet.
Yes.
As we find that place to meet, then yes, maybe in the end there can be forgiveness. Maybe it is in the end it's forgiveness in a way that says forgiveness, and I know I don't need to be in relationship with you. Forgiveness, and I know I don't need to talk about this anymore, right? So when we talk about having conflict with someone and going all the way into forgiveness, so we can talk about forgiveness now. The space in between is too big because there's too much emotion and there are too many things that have happened, right? Yet as we go through this process and we look at that, maybe there is a chance at the end we come into forgiveness.
I love that you're sharing this because for a long time I had issues with forgiveness because I thought that forgiving someone meant saying, oh, it's okay what you did. And some things are never going to be okay. Some
No,
things people do are never going to be okay. And then people say, yeah, but you don't forgive for the other person, you forgive for yourself. You forgive so that you can let it go. And I think, okay, sounds awesome in concept, but how do you see that working?
exactly. Because there's still some part of you that's going to be holding on to something.
Hurt or pain or rejection or whatever, yes?
Yeah. So I hope that what this did was gave everybody this a different context of what Ho'oponopono is, because it's much more in depth than I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you.
Exactly.
It's way more in depth than that. And this is one of the pieces that when I started seeing that, and there's nothing against that process, right? That process to me is all conceptual. In other words, it's a mind thing. It's my mind saying that over and over and over again. And yet, where's the place where my heart comes into the conversation? Where's the place where I land inside of my heart and in my heart center? Because when I land in my heart center, then sometimes the judgments and the shame and the guilt and the things that I felt in the past have an opportunity of shifting.
Yes, I agree. I recently had that because my dad did a lot of things that he shouldn't have done, and then you need to forgive someone, and he's he's been dead longer than he had been alive in my life, so you cannot have an actual conversation anymore. But still, you want to find a way of forgiving because you don't want to keep dragging it with you. You don't want to take it with you everywhere you go. So you need to find a way of letting it go. And what really made a difference in that for me was to realize that he is also a hurt person that comes from his mother and father that are also both hurt people that come from their family. And because I could see that he was coming from a place of his own internal hurt, that doesn't make it okay what he did, but it does make it more understandable, because everybody responds in a way that they're not proud of when they're coming from a place of hurt. We all have situations happen or have happened in our lives where we responded from a place of pain or hurt or anger or retaliation immediately when things happen. And then when you look at later, you think, oh, I could have handled that better or differently or something, right? So by
Exactly.
finally seeing my father as a human being with emotions, with his own traumas and his own experiences, I could forgive the hurt person, because hurt people hurt people. And that's what happened. He was a hurt person and he hurt me.
Mhm.
That doesn't make it okay, but it is what happened. And because I could look at it that way instead of the blame game or something, I was finally at a place where I could forgive the hurt person in him for hurting me and let it go.
Totally, totally agree. Because what it did is it broadened our perspective. It
Yes,
it allowed me to move past the human and all their pain, and to be able to see the soul.
yes,
And
exactly.
I have, I've had a very similar occurrence or in my life. And this is where I came to at some point, and it took me until I was in my late 40s before I could reach that place, that I had been carrying around all this hurt for all this time, and that the only person that it was affecting was me.
Yes,
Didn't matter how much I was angry and how much I was projecting anger at them. The reality is that the pain was internal, right? And you're right. And there's so many other ways that we can look at this, because there's generational trauma that we carry. And that was one of the things that helped me to come into a place so that I was able to let go and forgive as well. Because I looked at that and I went, wait a minute. I saw his mom. I knew who my grandmother was. And I realized as I grew older, she was mean.
hmm,
And she raised her children that way. And then I got to this place in my life and I went, oh my gosh, no wonder he is where he is. Because one is, look at what he went through. Two, look at the model of the world that he had. He didn't have another model to be. So he actually didn't know how to be in a loving relationship.
exactly.
He didn't. And there's this other place, because the little boy that was 6, 7, 8, 10 years old, 12 years old, there was no way I could understand that. So we were both acting from our hurt places.
Yes,
And as I got older, and when I got to that realization, I looked at that and I went, oh my goodness, okay, this is the place where I have the opportunity to look at this and go, I want to do this a different way.
exactly.
Inside of Ho'oponopono, inside of the process, we come to that place of, I want to do this a different way. Let's find another way to do this. Let's find another way to be inside of our lives.
Yes, exactly. And that's, I think, what it's about. Because in the end, you only hurt yourself by holding on to pain and anger and unforgiveness and all of those things. And in the end, that's not what you want.
No,
Everybody would agree. And do you want to hurt yourself? No, of course not. But that is in essence
but
what
we
you
do anyway. But we do
do.
anyway. right? And that's a whole aspect of my work that I talk about, because we carry all this pain, which is energy. And so what we're doing is we're constantly bombarding ourselves literally with negative energy, right? And that has very long-term physical effects, not just emotional effects, but it has long-term physical effects about what's going on, right?
Yes,
And
because our
so
thoughts influence us on our cellular level.
it influences everything. It influences the amount of stress and adrenaline that's going to our bodies, that's constantly breaking down the cellular structure. Oh my God, we could talk about this for hours.
Yes,
And I know that we don't have very much time left, so.
correct. Yes.
But I hope this gives people a different perspective of Ho'oponopono, and allows them to look at this differently, and and maybe to reach out to someone in your life that you've been carrying this around with, and come to a place inside of you that says, hey, can we talk? Because I want to do something different. I want to do this differently.
Exactly, because if you want people to respond differently to you, you have to start by responding differently yourself.
I'm waiting for you to apologize to me. Right.
Your dreams, it's never going to happen. So you need to take charge, but you need to do it in a constructive way that's actually going to solve something. Because if you say, hey, can we talk? And then you go, or this, you this, you that, you, then
You're
it's
back
still
in, you're
not
back in
going
the
to.
same place. You're back
Yes,
in the same place. Yeah.
exactly. So I've been really loving our talk, and I can imagine you, listener, viewer, that you have loved our talk as well. If that is the case, it would mean the world to me if you could like this talk today, and if you could subscribe to my channel so that you will never miss another video again. And if you think that it was valuable to you, then it would be even more amazing if you could share it with the people that are valuable to you in your life on social media, because you never know who needed to listen to this talk today. And by sharing it, you're not only doing me and James in this case a service, but also the people that know you, because they might need to hear these words at the moment that you're sharing it, and that would not have happened if you hadn't shared it. So please like, comment, share, and subscribe if you are digging this conversation as much as I have. But I can also imagine that when you're listening or viewing, maybe you have more questions. You can always put them in the comments and ask your questions. I'll make sure that either myself or James answers your questions if you put them in the comments. But if you want to reach out to James, where can people find you, James?
You can always find me on Facebook at James Kawainui. So I'm going to spell my last name for everybody so they can find it. And it's Kawainui, James Kawainui. And I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. And I think the easiest way would be for everyone to go to my website, which is www.jameskawainui.com. And if you do that, there's going to be a pop-up that's going to come, and it's going to ask you for your email. And if you give us your email, what's going to happen is I'm going to send you a meditation that I have. So it's a meditation. It's called the self-love meditation. And the meditation is part of that whole Ho'oponopono process, but it's about looking and being able to look inside and come into a place that I feel better about who I am. So reach out to me. If you want to email me directly, james@jameskawainui.com. I love talking to people. I will talk to everyone for at least 30 minutes. We'll talk about what's going on in your life and look and see if there's ways that I may be able to support you or put you in touch with somebody else that may be able to support wherever you are in your life right now.
I love that. Don't worry if you didn't catch the spelling or didn't pay enough attention to write everything down. I'll make sure that all James's links are in the show notes, either below or above or to the right, left of this video. I'm never sure where they're popping up, but somewhere around there will be show notes and the links will be in there. And of course, you can always reach out to me. I also offer a free virtual coffee chat or tea if you're not a coffee drinker, or beer or wine. I really really don't care what you're drinking, but it's an opportunity to talk and to see if I could help you or could put you in touch with somebody else that can help you. Because like James, I value that you get the help that you need. And if it's not with me or with him, then it's with somebody else
someone.
that we know.
It's time to be brave enough to actually ask for help.
Exactly.
And when you share this, what you're doing is you're creating the ripple. And that's what we do. We touch people's lives, and they in turn touch other people's lives. And that's what we're doing. We're creating this ripple. And guess what, people? That's how we're going to change the world. That's how we are changing the world.
Exactly. One even baby step at the time, if that's all you can manage. So thank you, viewer, for being here. Thank you, listener, for listening to this episode. Thank you, James, for being here, for sharing your wisdom about Ho'oponopono, and for showing us that it's so much more than just 4 lines in what most people call a forgiveness ritual. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today. And for you, viewer, listener, I hope you'll come back next week when I have my next guest, and we'll have an equally wonderful conversation with them as well. For today, I have nothing else to say than both to you, James, and to you, viewer and listener. Have an amazing rest of your day and talk again soon.
Aloha.
Aloha.